Welcome back to the FPL video. This will be the best wildcard team for Gameweek 16. Yet another quick turnaround. We have that Saturday deadline and the plan is to do a transfer tips, team selection, reaction stream, and then of course the deadline stream on Saturday, and also preparing all the UCL fantasy content for next Tuesday for the final match day of the group stages, match day 6. Smash the like button if you want to see all of that content, and subscribe if you're new. Our aim is to get this video to the 200 likes. If that's the case, then there will be all of the videos I just described, including transfer tips, reaction stream, team selection, and the deadline stream for Gameweek 16. In this video, of course, is the best 50-man squad for the wild card. I want to see your thoughts on that as well down the comment section below. It won't be perfect. It's not going to be to everyone's cup of tea. I'll try to discuss some alternatives as we go along. But without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. The man of the hour is Dubravka. Newcastle may still sign a goalkeeper in the transfer window and even a potential free agent like David De Gea, but I think Dubravka will be trusted upon and he could fill in for Nick Pope if indeed Pope is out for 4 to 5 months as expected. And I think Dubravka is a really good option to cover the Newcastle defence, especially for those that have Lascelles like myself, because there is a possibility of Botman coming back very soon. Lascelles could be displaced, dropped to the bench, and you've got that Newcastle defensive coverage with Martin Dubravka, only 4 million still, and I'd highly recommend him. The other goalkeeper in this wildcard video is going to be Areola. He's not going to be particularly great, but there is nice rotation between Newcastle and West Ham. When Newcastle have a bad fixture, you've got West Ham coming in with a decent one on paper, but only 1 clean sheet for Areola and co so far this season in the Premier League. I still think Areola is decent, and with these two goalkeepers, you're spending 8.2 million, 8.3, depending on when you got Areola. So it really isn't going to cost you too much, and it is worth it. I still like David Raya, by the way, despite his 2 major mistakes against Luton Town. You can go for him still, but over the next 3 game weeks, I'm not fancying that Arsenal defensive double up. If you just want that goalkeeper option in the long term on the wild card, then you can go for Raya over Areola, but it would be making some downgrades in the other positions. Saliba has been quite underwhelming in the last 2 game weeks. 2 one-pointers back-to-back, 1 for a yellow card and conceding to Wolves, with Zinchenko gifting the opposition a goal. And then in the following game week, you've got David Raya with 2 absolute howlers. And also for the first goal, Arsenal switched off defensively and they were very vulnerable from set pieces. And Saliba has a great record in terms of yellow cards and reds, and hopefully I haven't jinxed it, because as soon as I mentioned that stat, just 1 or 2 game weeks later, he got that booking for the first time in 411 days. But I think Saliba is still the best way to enter the Arsenal defence, because you've got Gabriel, who could be rotated from time to time, and I also think Saliba is better for bonus points, and also has more goal threat so far this season, which also includes the assists. And when you look at Zinchenko, he got benched despite Tomiyasu not being available, and Tomiyasu is going to be out for up to 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 3 to 4, depending on how quickly he recovers. I think Arsenal will try to have him ready for that 23rd of December clash against Liverpool at Anfield. Let's now go to the other defenders, and the next one plays in a team which definitely doesn't have a really good defence at this moment in time. But Pedro Porro, I keep on mentioning him in all my streams. The attacking potential, the set pieces, there's so much to like, and the long-term fixtures for Spurs are really encouraging. So even in those fixtures like Newcastle at home, you could play Pedro Porro and he can get you 4 to 6 points because of those assists. So I would go for him. I think he's a good option in the heart of the defence. Now, the third option is a bit of a differential. He plays in a team that don't have a great run of fixtures really up until April. And also, there's so much going on in the background with this particular Premier League club. But I would go for Mykolenko. I think he is a decent option at 4.4 million. If you are looking for that budget defender, I think Mykolenko could offer you some defensive security and squad depth, which is very important in this festive period. He's not going to be the absolute best, and there will be some frustration along the way. But I think Mykolenko could be a steady option. He's got attacking potential this season, and he can also get bonus points and the odd clean sheet here and there. The fourth defender will be Tsimikas, and he could be benched against Sheffield United by the time this video is published, but I still think Tsimikas is the best way into the Liverpool defence. You might argue that it's Trent, and I think overall, yes, he'll score the most points, but beyond the 2 next game weeks, I'd just rather have the cheaper option in Tsimikas up until Robertson comes back around January. I think that's the best way to cover the Reds. I am going to include an expensive defender for the first time in a long while in one of these wildcard videos, and that's Kieran Trippier. I would go for that defensive double up in Newcastle. I think the games long term are just so appealing, and particularly in those home matches, Newcastle are a force to be reckoned with. They've only conceded 4 goals at St James's Park this season, and that's where Trippier comes into a league of his own and could be a captaincy option on many occasions. And with Lascelles, I just don't really see him being in the Newcastle team beyond December. He might get the odd start because he has covered for Sven Botman very well, but it's not the same level as Kieran Trippier, and you're going to get that steady option who starts week in, week out and gets plenty of assists and bonus points in the process. But that's the defensive line. I think some honourable mentions include Kyle Walker, with Manchester City now entering a really nice period of fixtures. You could also go for Reece James at the back, or Colwill, Badiashile, and even as a goalkeeper option, you can go for Robert Sanchez. So don't let me discourage you from Chelsea assets. They can be pretty good with their amazing fixture run coming up, but I'm still not quite convinced. And a bit like Manchester City, I don't really think of them as great FPL options. I think Reece James certainly could be, but his injury record is very, very frustrating and also a constant worry. And I'm not so sure if Reece James can stay fit. Saka has the most assists of any player in the top 5 leagues with 11. I think Wirtz is the closest to him, but Saka's been so consistent this season, and there's this constant debate about Son versus Saka, and I think they're both genuinely great options. There's not much to separate them. I think in terms of the captaincy, I'd rather go for Son on a lot of occasions just because of his higher ceiling, but what I like about Saka is the sheer consistency. Even with an off day, he can give you 5 to 6 points, sometimes even more through bonus, and he is just so consistent for Arsenal. If you looked at the game against Luton Town, most of the attacks came on Saka's side, particularly towards the end of the game. He took a lot of responsibility, and in matches such as Brentford, for example, he created 5 chances in that game alone. So I think Saka is a constant threat and always offers that creativity and the goal scoring from time to time. He is the main penalty taker, although with Arsenal you do have this sharing going on. Kai Havertz has taken a penalty, Fabio Vieira, and also Martin Odegaard, so that isn't really going to be the most reassuring thing. But I think Saka is a fantastic FPL option, and I would rather go for him over Heung-min Son. If you want to go for both of them, that's completely fine, but you would have to restructure this 50-man squad, and you have to do a lot of work with that as well. Now, the second midfielder is going to be Bryan Mbeumo. Great fixtures long term. You could sell him in Gameweek 18, but you could even, if you play the free hit especially, just bypass that and then sell him around Gameweek 21, which is when he heads off to the African Cup of Nations. And that's another reason why I haven't gone for Son, because we already have plenty of African Cup of Nations players, and also with the blank Gameweek 18 in mind, you are booking in potentially too many transfers by going for Heung-min Son, and also if you go for other players from Asia or from Africa. Now, the third midfielder is going to be Mohamed Salah. He has to be in it. It doesn't matter if he's heading off to the African Cup of Nations in Gameweek 21, and he could be unavailable up until Gameweek 25 in that instance, even though Egypt might not be at the absolute best level. But Salah, for me, is right up there with Haaland as the best options, and maybe with this fixture run coming up for Manchester City, you could argue that Haaland is number 1 and Salah's number 2, but honestly, the midfielder advantage is very crucial. He can get the clean sheet points, an extra point for scoring a goal, and Salah's consistency is second to none in the Premier League. My fourth choice here is going to be Anthony Gordon, who is still flagged at the time of this recording, but he'll probably be available, and that flag will be cleared by the Thursday when he plays against his former club Everton. And Anthony Gordon is my favourite option at 6 million and below. And then you look at the alternatives, Hwang Hee-chan, I do like the look of as well, and in Gameweek 15 he was my favourite, as I always discuss. He got a 10-pointer against Burnley, but I still prefer Gordon and Cole Palmer overall. And speaking of the devil, that's who we're going to go for as the fifth choice, Cole Palmer. It might seem a bit weird to do something like this in terms of going for 5 to 6 million midfielders, but I really think they offer great value, and Palmer being on penalties, having great underlying numbers, and that run of fixtures, I just think you have to have one Chelsea player at the very least. Cole Palmer would be my favourite, then it's probably going to be Sterling, and then you'd be looking at the likes of Sanchez or Reece James in the back line, but Cole Palmer is my favourite Chelsea option. I'm very confident he'll be back in the starting 11 against Manchester United, and to have a midfielder who's that nailed on, playing for Chelsea, who are struggling still, but they do have some decent attacking potential. He's only 5.3 million. There's so much to love there with Cole Palmer. He's still a relative differential, and he's not going to be a template pick by any stretch of the imagination. So I think Cole Palmer would be a fantastic addition to your FPL team. The final part of this team is the forwards, and I have gone for Semenyo over Cameron Archer this time. You could go for either one, or Mabama, or Manice. It really depends on budget, what you want to do, but if you want a potentially decent 4.6 million forward, I think Semenyo is the best of the lot. Archer would be second, and then you're looking at Mabama if he can ever get the minutes, really. But Semenyo has been very, very impressive this season. He started the season well, tailed off a little bit, and then in recent weeks he's picked up again, while Bournemouth have done a bit of a resurgence under Iraola. So I think Semenyo is definitely the pick of the bunch, but he will be sitting on your bench more often than not. And when you compare him to the rest of this 50-man squad, particularly the 13 outfield players, he will be the worst. But you never know. He could come in handy from time to time and be a decent FPL option. Now, the two forwards will be quite simple. Ollie Watkins, who I sold, by the way, for Darwin Nunez. And I just don't seem to learn my lesson when it comes to selling Watkins, because the two times I've sold him, it's cost me 30 to 40 points overall, and my season could be entirely different, but it is what it is. Watkins is very consistent. Even when he plays Man City or Arsenal, he can do extremely well, and I'd highly encourage anyone who has Watkins and is considering selling him, even for 1 or 2 game weeks, to reconsider. It's not a bad option, and I think you could, have some gains and you could see it pay off. But I think the best thing to do, especially when you might have other files to put out in the coming weeks, is to keep hold of these consistent assets who play 90 minutes week in, week out. And even though he's not on penalties anymore, Watkins makes up for it with his constant goal threat. The underlying numbers are fantastic, and you're not going to find better at that price and below in any position in the game, in my opinion. So Ollie Watkins is in it, and I'd also go for Erling Haaland in this best wildcard team. Very simple stuff. With a fixture run coming up and a potential blank in Game Week 18, it doesn't really matter. Erling Haaland has to be in your FPL team. He's as close to essential as you can get from this stage onwards, and he's going to be a great captaincy option in most game weeks. This is where the goalkeeper rotation comes in handy. Dubravka's away to Tottenham, and you can fill him in with Areola away to Fulham and have a back three of Tsimikas, Saliba and Kieran Trippier, a midfield 5 of Salah, Saka, Gordon, Palmer and Mbeumo, and a front 2 of Haaland and Ollie Watkins in Game Week 16. It might not look that particularly great in terms of fixtures for Game Week 16, and even the bench, Dubravka away to Tottenham, Mikalenko at home to Chelsea, Pedro Porro at home to Newcastle, and Semenyo away to Manchester United. But if we look at future Game Weeks as well, Game Week 17, it looks really solid. You can put Dubravka in the starting 11 over Areola, and you'll also see an increase in expected points. You also have some really good options on the bench like Tsimikas and Saliba, and look at some of these fixtures. Sheffield United at home for Palmer, you've got Mbeumo at home to Aston Villa. I think that's good from an offensive perspective. You've got Gordon at home to Fulham, same with Trippier. I think there could be some massive returns for those Newcastle assets. Even Pedro Porro and Mikalenko with some decent away fixtures. Saka against Brighton I think is pretty good. Salah has an amazing record against Manchester United, especially in recent seasons. Haaland at home to Crystal Palace, and Watkins away to Brentford, his former club. So there's a lot to like. I think long term this 50-man squad will look really solid, and as I said before, you can go for Son in this setup, maybe even over Saka, and you can always sell the likes of Son, Mbeumo and Salah around Game Week 21 when the Asian Cup and the African Cup of Nations starts. And also in Game Week 18, you can navigate this quite easily with this particular 50-man squad because you only have Mbeumo and Haaland. And in terms of other players that I haven't mentioned, maybe Diogo Dalot is a pretty good choice, especially in Game Week 16. You can bench him in the game weeks afterwards and then reintroduce him into your starting 11. There's a lot to discuss, and there's so many different players that will rise to the occasion, and there's a lot more that we're going to cover throughout the rest of the year. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to over 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 22,000 subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon, Championships Discord server, and the FPL League. All of that is there. There's also one for Draft Time, which I'd highly recommend. All the graphics on the left-hand side of the screen throughout the video aren't up to date, and it was basically the numbers from Gameweek 14, but not to worry, you'll see the updated ones in the team selection video and the deadline stream, so be sure to check out the future content as well. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 15, 16, and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.